welcome Ivan. So in this lesson, we're going to have a look at Cambridge Book 8 and the 4 tests for the speaking component in that specific book. So as you know, it is common for general as well as academic students, right? So there's no difference in your speaking test. So both categories can have a look at the same questions as the speaking component is common. Now, as you know, this part of the test begins with the examiner introducing himself or herself and checking the candidate's identification. It then continues as an interview. In the interview, the examiner asks the candidate about him or herself, his or homework, studies, and other familiar topics. So as you know, you will get 3 topics, altogether 12 questions. So under each topic, you have 4 questions, right? And usually part 1 will run for about 4 to 5 minutes. Right, so let's have a look at a typical part 1 set of questions, right? Now all the questions are here, okay, but I'd like to go through one by one first. How well do you know the people who live next door to you? Well, personally, I know them really well because our houses are quite close to each other. So I've just got one neighbor on this side. So I know their family really well. And sometimes in the evening, we spend some time together. We're like good friends, actually. Next question. How often do you see them? Oh, I would see them every day in the morning sometimes. She's a housewife, so if she's at home and I'm at home, sometimes we see each other in the afternoon. But if not, definitely in the evening we see each other. We sit down in the garden and we talk to each other as well. What kinds of problems, should be problems, right? What kind of problems do people sometimes have with their neighbors? Sometimes people don't get along well with their neighbors, and sometimes there are arguments, disputes, and unpleasant experiences with some neighbors. But some of them, obviously, you have a good time together, you understand each other, and you can share your your stories with each other, and sometimes the neighbors become your best friends. So the problems, I would say, are the ones that I mentioned earlier. How do you think neighbors can help each other? Well, that depends on the situation. Sometimes they can help each other, like if you have small kids. For example, at my place, she would look after my kids if I'm busy sometimes. You could probably, if you cook something, you could share it with each other, share your experiences with each other. If you buy new things or if you buy something which is good, you could share your experience with each other. If there is a trouble, someone passes away, or there's a birthday party, you could always walk in and help them, lend a helping hand so that they feel comfortable and eased out. Okay, so now we are going to move into a part 2. Now why I put up the questions individually is that probably you could go through it on your own and you could come up with your own answers, right? You pause the question, you have a look at your own answer, then you listen to mine, and you could probably, if you don't understand anything, probably you could pop up a question for us in the comment section, okay? I'm just giving you answers spontaneously, right? So there might be things that you feel, oh, that's nice, that's good, okay? Or, we could do something like this. Is this answer better? So if you feel that you want to ask anything, please feel free to put it in the comments box. So moving on into our part 2 question. Here you know that you get a specific card, and there you will also get a paper and a pencil, and you can make notes if you wish. So your preparation time will be 1 minute, and you are going to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. So once your preparation time is finished, the examiner would say, all right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please? So remember, the examiner controls your time. Let's get back to our question. Describe a time when you were asked to give your opinion in a questionnaire or survey. Can be a bit tricky here. Okay? So you have to tell me, when you were asked to give your opinion about something, what is it, a questionnaire or survey? What the questionnaire or survey was about, why you were asked to give your opinions, right? What opinions you gave, explain how you felt about giving your opinions. Right, so you can make some notes if you want. If I was you, I would write down some points. Marketing. Right, so I have written down my points which I thought would be useful for me to give this answer. So, describing a time when I was asked to give my opinion on a question or survey would be when I was a university student. So, this was for a certain survey that was done by a certain group of students who were studying marketing. Now, why I was asked to give my opinions was I had done the subject the previous semester and I had got a high distinction. So the junior batch thought that it would be a good idea to ask for some help or advice as to how they would structure their survey. So what opinions I gave? So looking at their questionnaire, I felt that their questions weren't clearly structured. So I gave them feedback on how to rephrase their questions. Then I did see that there was some issues in terms of their population that they had selected. Their parameters weren't that great, so I had to fine-tune and tell them how they could fine-tune the parameters and make sure that their population was accurate. And another thing was that their sample size wasn't sufficient enough to derive the necessary information and put it or run it through the SPSS package, right? So that is where they had to put in or input the data and analyze the data. So I felt that if they had taken that sample size, there would have been a bigger sampling error. So I gave them feedback on that. Now, how I felt about giving my opinions was I was really happy because I felt that, I was in some kind of use for some students. And they also mentioned that the positive feedback that I gave them helped them quite a lot to make sure that their survey was done up to the standard and that they were positive that they could get a good grade. So finally, I remember when they got their grade, they also had got a distinction and they were very happy and they came and thanked me for giving my honest feedback. So you can come up with your own answer, okay? But make sure you stick to the framework. What the survey was about, why you were asked to give the opinions, what opinions you gave, and how you felt about it, okay? Very, very important to make sure you touch on all the bullet points. So, two-way discussion, right? Now here you have all the questions. Let me go one by one with you. So you have asking questions, right, about different things, and then again you have some example questions about questionnaires in school. So let's have a look at this asking questions. What kinds of organizations want to find out about people's opinions? I think most companies doing research, they want to find out about people's opinions. But apart from that, any company that provides products or services to the market would want to find out about the people's opinions. Are they happy with the product? Are there any changes that people would want? Are they happy with the after service, right? So people would want to know the opinion to make sure that, repeat purchasing happens within the organization. Do you think that questionnaires or surveys are good ways of finding out people's opinions? I personally think they are good ways of finding out how people think, but there could be some problems. Now, if the questions are not structured properly, and if the sample size is fairly small, there could be errors and we would not be able to understand the real picture of the market. So for an example, we can say, right, I want to launch a new type of ice cream or a new flavor. So what I do is I only take a sample for Colombo, but I distribute ice cream all over Sri Lanka. So the Colombo population says, yeah, this is good, blueberry flavor is excellent, and I launch the product. But what happens is that apart from Colombo, nowhere else are people buying the blueberry flavor. That becomes a problem. So it's a good thing to find out about the opinions, but you should be careful as to what kind of opinions are you taking back from them? What is your target audience? What is your sample that you're taking? A lot of factors to consider if you're using primary data collection methods, which is questionnaires or surveys that are primary data collection method. What reasons might people have for not wanting to give their opinions? Some people don't want to bring out their opinions. It could be for different reasons. One main reason is that they don't want to be a part of that group. Some people feel uncomfortable and they think people might recognize them, so they don't want to bring out their opinions. Another reason could be that they really don't understand the importance of being a part of this survey or group. So they would not want to take part in it. Let's talk a bit about questionnaires in school. Do you think it would be a good idea for schools to ask students their opinions about lessons? Personally, for me, I think it's good, right? One reason is that you could get feedback from the students. Have they understood the concepts? Do they like your teaching methods? Do they think your teaching styles are effective? And also, what are the areas that you as a teacher could improve, right? On the other hand, from a student's perspective, I think it makes them feel that they want to be a part of the system, and it gives them a chance to voice their opinion. So if they're not understanding something and if something is not effective, we can rectify it at the start rather than going to the end and trying to manage the situation. Personally, I think that that's something good. At universities, they do evaluate us at the end of each semester. So that gives us a good understanding, personally for myself, to see which areas am I good at and which areas do I need to improve. And also, I feel the students feel important and they love to give feedback. So they say, oh, miss, this is good, this is not that good. And they jot it down because it's anonymous. We don't know who is giving us that feedback, but we would get positive as well as areas for improvement, which is good in the long run. Okay? What would the advantages for schools be if they ask students their opinions? So like I said before, the advantages are they could rectify problems at an early stage without waiting for the latter part. People feel involved and a part of the process, so they would want to engage more in the activities. And also it gives room for development, teacher training programs, and then students, if that, the teacher has given everything and the students aren't understanding, then it gives room for other teachers to come and lecture them or give them the lesson to see if the different teaching methods work. So there's a lot of good things that could be taken out of being given the chance for them to voice out their opinion. What are the disadvantages by asking students their opinions? Sometimes it could be biased, right? Sometimes students don't really understand what is being asked by them, so the answer could be wrong. Apart from that, some students, apart from whatever you do, some of them are just always negative, okay? So they will make sure that you get negative feedback, and that would be sometimes demotivating for the teacher in the long run. So students need to be taught how to answer and how they should not be biased when they're answering these questions, which could be difficult because they're school kids and they might not understand the concept of a survey or a questionnaire, right? All right, so now we are moving into test 2, right? So similarly, you have part 1, part 2, and part 3. So in part 1, the test always begins by the examiner introducing him or herself and checking the candidate's identification. And then it kind of continues as an interview. In the interview, the examiner asks the candidate about the work or maybe studies, very generalized, familiar topics. So, here are some questions about newspapers and magazines. Let's run through each question. Which magazines or newspapers do you read? To be quite honest, I don't have the time to read as often as I used to. But provided I get some time, I tend to read the Sunday newspaper on a weekly basis. What kinds of articles? I'm just going to add this here as well, okay? What kinds of articles are you most interested in? Me, basically, I'm interested in the business section. I also look at the education section in the newspaper. I think those two are the most important parts for me in the newspaper. Have you ever read a newspaper or magazine in a foreign language? Yes, I think English is a foreign language for us, especially as a Sri Lankan. And I've always read the English newspaper. Apart from that, I haven't read any other language. Do you think reading a newspaper or magazine in a foreign language is a good way to learn the language? I personally think so, and I tell students from a very young age, start reading the newspaper or magazines. And if you do it from a very young age, it's easier for you to develop your language skills. Because when you read it, you expose yourself to vocabulary, sentence patterns, it improves your reading speed. It helps you to understand better. So I definitely think that it is a good way to learn a foreign language. Now moving on into part 2. Now as you know, you will get this on a card and you will have a minute to prepare yourself. You can make some notes if you wish. Once you finish, you have to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. Right? So when your preparation time is finished, they will ask you, all right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up, can you start speaking now please, right? So let's have a look at the question. Describe a restaurant that you enjoyed going to. You should say where the restaurant was, why you chose this restaurant, what type of food you ate in this restaurant, and explain why you enjoyed eating at this restaurant. Okay? So let's talk about a restaurant. I'm sorry, I'm not being, biased. I'm not promoting either one, but I have to tell a name if I'm going to talk about this. Okay. So where is the restaurant? This is in Nugegoda. Why you chose the restaurant? Right, so these are the points I made, right? And it's not necessary that everyone understands it, right? So I've put down VFM, value for money, so you could come up with your own abbreviations, right? So describing a restaurant I enjoyed going to would be this nice Chinese restaurant in Nugegoda, and the name is Chinese Dragon. Why I chose going to this restaurant, the main reason was easy access, because it's quite close by to my place and I can quickly get there, so it was easy access. Apart from that, I've been like a patriotic kind of person there, right? I love their food. I've been a customer with them for a long time, so I kind of like being a repeat customer there. So because of the good food, I like going there. What type of food I ate at the restaurant? It is a Chinese food restaurant, so I did have Chinese dishes. And explain why I enjoyed eating at this restaurant. The main thing is the food. It tastes amazing, and it's got a touch of real origin Chinese, the flavor. I really like their fried rice and their cuttlefish and their pork dishes. So I love the flavor. The other thing is the ambience. It's quite calm and it's not too crowded. The staff are quite friendly and they're quite quick in their service. They don't take a lot of time. Apart from that, it's value for money, right? So I could get a few dishes for a cheaper price, and the quantity is obviously more than the other places. So I really enjoy going to this specific Chinese restaurant. Okay. Now, if you were to come up with something, you could come up with a name and a place that you want, right? So I'm not promoting either one. I'm just, using it as an example with my personal experience. Okay. Right. Moving on. We're going into part 3 questions. Now, you could go through the questions here about restaurants and producing food. I'd like to go through each question separately. Why do you think people go to restaurants when they want to celebrate something? I personally think people like to go to a restaurant because it's less hassle. I mean, when you want to celebrate something, you've got to invite a lot of people. So if it is at home, you need to cook, you need to wash, you need to clear up everything, and then it takes such a long time. Whereas if you take it to a restaurant, everything's done for you. You just sit down, you eat, and you come back home. So it's less hassle. And apart from that, it's the difference. When you're at home, it's the same old place you've been. But if you're at a restaurant, it's got a different atmosphere, and people tend to enjoy and be more relaxed. Which are more popular in your country? Fast food restaurants or traditional restaurants? Why do you think that is? In my country, I think there is still a balance kind of in terms of traditional and fast food. But I personally think when I look around, there's more fast food restaurants. The reason for this could be that people have busy lifestyles and everyone's going to work and they're tired on their way. They just want to pick up something and come back home. So I think the main reason why fast food restaurants have increased in number is because of this reason. Some people say that food in an expensive restaurant is always better than food in a cheap restaurant. Would you agree? I wouldn't always agree on that. I think it depends on who the chef is, right? So sometimes you could have really expensive restaurants which have horrible food, and you would have cheap end restaurants which have amazing and great food, and lots of people always walk in. So I think it depends on your chef and the flavor, right? So food need to be catered to people in that specific country. So Sri Lankans like a lot of flavor, spice. So if the chef can prepare it depending on the target group, then of course I think people enjoy the food. So it doesn't really matter in terms of price. What matters is the quality and the taste of the food. Let's talk about producing food. Do you think there will be a greater choice of food available in shops in the future, or will there be a less choice? I mean, looking at it now, in a crisis kind of situation, I think there would be less choices of food in the future. I don't think, the world is becoming any better. We've got lots of problems, pollution happening around, scarcity of food, lots of children suffering from malnutrition and hunger. So I think the choices of food will reduce in the future. What effects has modern technology had on the way food is produced? I think with modern technology, people are exposed to different things, such as how could they produce more veggie or fruit? What kind of fertilizer could be used to produce more fresh or food? What kind of methods could you use in the long run for the land, maybe, how to prepare your vegetable patches? So I think with that, people have exposed themselves to better ways of managing and growing vegetable and fruit and increasing the number in terms of produce. How important is it for a country to be able to grow all the food it needs without importing any from other countries? I think it's quite important, right? Especially for countries like Sri Lanka, developing countries, that would really reduce your import cost, okay? So when we need to import stuff, we need a lot of money because we need to pay our money out and then get the goods, right? And obviously there's also a problem with the fruit or veggie being fresh, okay? When it is freshly grown in your own country, it's nice to eat and you feel good about it, and it's obviously something that the people would want because it saves a lot of money and it's less expensive as well. So now we're moving into test 3. Okay. Now again, let me tell you part 1, part 2 and part 3 is there. Okay, so part 1, you have about 3 topics. Under each topic, you have 4 questions, 12 questions in total, right? And it begins with the examiner introducing him or herself, and then it continues as an interview, and then they would ask you familiar topics. So let's have a look at this question, or rather the topic, flowers. Do you like to have flowers in your home? Yes, I do like to have flowers in my home, but I don't really like to grow them on my own. If someone really, nurtures the trees and the flowers are blooming, I really love to see it in my garden. But I'm not like, a person who loves gardening. Where would you go to buy flowers? I would always go to a florist, and there's a florist that I know down close to Colombo 14, and it's called Amila Flowers. He does a great job with bouquets of flowers, and I love to go there. On what occasions would you give someone flowers? Personally, I would give someone flowers if it's their birthday, if it's their wedding anniversary, sometimes when they have a newborn baby, housewarming parties, And then any special achievements like, graduation, getting a new job opportunity, leaving the country, things like that. Are flowers important in your culture? Yes, it is. I think in our culture it's quite important as Sri Lankans. I mean, a lot of Tamil people use it to decorate their hair, and they use it a lot when they go to worship in the Kovil. We as Buddhists also use a lot of flowers when we go to worship Lord Buddha. So I think it's a very important part. And when it comes to weddings, we love to have floral arrangements. So it is a quite important thing in our culture. Moving on into part 2. Now, as you know, in part 2, you have a cue card, right? Or they give you a specific topic and the card. And what do? You need to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. You can prepare for 1 minute and they give you a paper and a pencil, right? And at the end, once the time is up for you to start speaking, the examiner would say, all right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up, can you start speaking now, please? Okay, so once that happens, you can start speaking about your topic. Now, have a look at this question. Describe a meeting you remember going to at work or school. Okay, so meeting, work, college or school. When and where the meeting was held, who was at the meeting, what the people at the meeting talked about, why you remember going to this meeting. So, talking about a meeting that I went, this was during my work period at a specific consultancy firm. When and where the meeting was held, so this was held in August 2017 and it was held in Batticaloa. So this meeting was aimed at developing a marketing and communication strategy for a specific company. So this company had just started up in Sri Lanka and it required my support to set up and come up with their marketing and comm strategy. So everyone in that organization, I would say the managers, so our team leader, deputy team leader, ICT officer and the other inclusion officers and then the other managers were involved in this meeting. Apart from that, we had an Australian coming in to support me with the necessary feedback and, setting it up because it was an Australian consultancy firm. So we had this special person called Beth Giger coming in to support me with this task. So what the people at the meeting talked about was that we were talking about how would we develop this marketing and comm strategy? Who was our target audience? What kind of area should we touch on? Because this was a project done along with the government of Sri Lanka, branding was another aspect that we had to look into. So what were our branding strategies, in terms of logos? Which ones can we use? Can we use it in black and white? Should it be in color? What kind of promotional material could we use, right? And how were we going to promote this specific project in Sri Lanka? So we were looking at a broader aspect and the discussions were quite broad, I would say. Why I remember going to this meeting was this was a new job role that I had taken on board and I really loved this job role and I thought it gave me a lot of insight to new things like even technology. And at that time, Beth had done her specialization in communication. So it also gave me an insight as to how others thought about communication and how important communication was in terms of a project, right? And obviously, I remember other foreign consultants coming in. So, and my boss or the team leader himself was an Australian who had a lot of experience. So I kind of really enjoyed that exposure and the experience I got. And that's why I remember it the most. Okay? So here you can talk about your own experience. Right now, as you can see, I didn't make any notes. So this was for the students who didn't want to make notes or who weren't comfortable in notes. If they want to freely talk, that's fine. But you need to remember what? We are following the structure of the card that we get for the exam. Okay? All right. So moving on, we have part 3 questions. So we're going to talk about going to meetings, right? And international meetings. So let's have a look at each question, right? What are the different types of meetings that people often go to? I mean, it depends. Sometimes you would go for office matters, like, the marketing meetings or maybe accounting related meetings. Sometimes they're informal meetings to quickly discuss about product launch or, you're having an inauguration of something. So it could be for different reasons. Sometimes you go to university, you have staff meetings, right? Sometimes you have meetings when you want to discuss about student behavior or maybe assignments, how to, mark assignments. So different reasons. Some people say that no one likes to go to meetings. What do you think? I would say that's true, right? I'm sometimes a person who doesn't want to walk into meetings because, sometimes it's so boring to sit there. And sometimes it's just too overwhelming with a lot of information. So I would agree that people say that, most people don't like to go to meetings. But looking at this word saying no one, I would have my doubts there because there are some people who would want to go for meetings and they find it quite important and crucial to attend for meetings. So I wouldn't categorize everyone in the same bag, but I would say there are some who don't really want to go in for meetings. Okay. Why can it sometimes be important to go to meetings? Because some meetings are really important, right? It helps you to set the strategy, and sometimes attending these meetings are important for future performance. So therefore, I think it is important sometimes. Let's talk about international meetings. Now, I'm giving you fairly short answers as well, right? Because I want you to think outside the box and add more information. If I go to tell you everything, right, there's no point in doing these Cambridge books. So later on you'll see, when it comes to test 4, I'll just put up the questions and tell you to find your own answers, right? And maybe you can type up the answers for us in the comment box, or you could record it and send it over to us, right? Talking about international meetings, why do you think world leaders often have meetings together? One reason is because they want to make sure that they understand each other well. And world leaders, obviously, secondly, they want to be, linked, and they want to have that good communication among each other, because in case they want to reach out for help, they should know each other well to get the necessary support. So I think that is another reason why they have meetings. And apart from that, I think it's always good to, keep yourself posted about what's happening around the world. So that could be another reason. What possible difficulties might be involved in organizing meetings between world leaders? Could be a few difficulties. One thing is the time difference that different countries have. Second reason could be their busy schedules, so that each and every person has their own schedule. They're going in for this, that, and different types of work. That could be a challenge. The other reason is communication could be a challenge, because some nationalities, they don't speak English, and when you translate, sometimes there are issues in translations. So these are the 3 types of difficulties I could think of. Do you think that meetings between international leaders will become more frequent in the future, or will there be less need for it? I think it would be more frequent because of how the world is developing, right? Nuclear weapons in practice, and then lots of issues in terms of export-import regulations. So I think in future, there will be more meetings among international leaders. All right, so moving on into test 4. Now you know we've got part 1, part 2 and part 3. So part 1, as I told you in all the tests, is the same, right? So the test will begin by the examiner introducing him or herself and asking for student identification, and then it's like an interview, and the examiner will ask you about familiar topics, right? Let's look at part 1 about television, okay? It's not television, it's not television, it's television, television, okay? So it's not sh ekak nae, okay? Like chef, no, television, okay? So work on your pron as well when you're doing, pron means pronunciation, okay? So work on your pronunciation. Remember, it is a marking criteria, okay? So you have to think about your pronunciation, and pronunciation is, you should try to be close to native speakers, okay? Now, some people have this argument, we can pronounce the Sri Lankan way, others say no. My understanding, it depends, okay? Mama kiyane mage adahasa as a language teacher, right? Pronounce it accurately. Use the dictionary and pronounce it properly because it's their language. It's not us to change it as we want, okay? Api kiyane oh mama gedara yanama. Okay, we don't say that. Why don't we say that? Api gedara yanama. You have a proper pronunciation because that's how we Sinhalese speak. Okay, so you have to make sure you give that respect for the language and pronounce it the proper way. Okay, and the best way to do that is by listening to the sound from the Cambridge Dictionary. Okay, so please practice that way. I would advise you to practice it that way. Do not learn pronunciation like this. So let me show it to you. Television, and then people write it in Sinhalese, right? Television. Do not do that, okay? Because it's not television, it's television, okay? And when you're learning it, be careful to learn the proper pron, okay? So avoid writing in Sinhalese pron, okay? And pron can only be taught by drilling and listening to the sound. So when someone drills the sound, if someone is saying it wrong, then that's going to go into your head. So please be careful as to other sources that you use when you're doing your pronunciation, okay? Ehinda harima carefully eka karana. I'm going to tell in Sinhala as well. Right? Pronunciation කරනකොට ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් ලියලා සිංහලෙන් ලියලා කරන ඒවා කරන්න එපා please. Right? මොකද ඒක අපිට කරන්න බෑ. හැම එකටම ඒක කරන්න බෑ. දැන් මම කරපු example එකේ television කරන්න බෑ because it's not a television. Okay, it's television. Television. Okay? ඒක හොඳම විදිය තමයි පුරුදු වෙන්න. You listen and drill. සමහරක් වෙලාවට when we were trained, right? So we don't really look at the teacher. So what we do is we turn the back like this and then we listen to her sound. Okay, so I had a female tutor called Anne, right? And she used to teach us that way. So sometimes we do look at her mouth, sometimes we don't. We had different teaching methods. So I'd like you to use those. ඉගෙන ගත්ත දේ මොකක් හරි හොඳ එකක් නම් I'd like you also to practice the same way. හින්දා හොඳට අහගන්න. අහගෙන ඒ dictionary එකේ sound එක තියෙනවා අහගෙන try to practice it. Okay? So how often do you watch television? Personally, I don't watch a lot of television. I would say probably twice a week. I don't watch television on a day-to-day basis. Which television channel do you usually watch? Oh, I'm not very specific to a certain channel, but I do watch to see babies or baby TV because my kids watch it. And apart from that, I watch, I don't know, maybe Swarnavahini, maybe Hiru, Dherana. I watch all of that, okay? It depends. I mean, sometimes my parents are there and they're watching something, or my maid is there, she's watching something, so it depends. Do you enjoy the advertisements on television? I will say before, when I was a kid, I enjoyed those. But as I've grown up now, I think some of those advertisements are actually useless. And I don't enjoy it as I used to enjoy it in the past. Do you think most programs on television are good? Oh, might be a problem if I answer that. So, no offense. Okay, this is just my personal view. I feel a lot of programs on the Sri Lankan channels are just useless, okay? All it gives you is entertainment and nothing for you to develop or think about, okay? I see a few programs that are good and it helps people and students to learn something, but apart from that, I think most of it is just for entertainment and they're looking at getting more rating, and I just think it's not that useful, okay? Right. So moving on to part 2, right? Now remember, you will have 1 to 2 minutes to talk about this topic, and you will have 1 minute about what you're going. You can make notes for 1 minute. You can prepare for 1 minute, and if you want, you can make some notes. Once the time is up, right, your prep time is up, the examiner will say, all right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes to speak. So don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please? So here is your topic. Describe a friend of your family you remember from your childhood. Now I'd like you to do this on your own. I'm not going to support you and give you answers. I'm just going to tell you what the card is, right? So describe a friend of your family you remember from your childhood, who the person was, how your family knew this person, how often this person visited your family, and explain why you remember this person, right? So I'd like you to send me your sample answers in the comment box, or just type up the answers and send it over so we could have a look at it, okay? Right, so moving on into part 3, we've got questions about friendship and questions about influence of friendship. Let's have a look at the questions one by one. What do you think makes someone a good friend to a whole family? What do you think? I think it's the person's personal traits, right? Being very friendly and honesty are the 2 most important traits. Do you think we meet different kinds of friends at different stages of our lives? In what ways are these types of friends different? Okay. Well, I think yes, we meet different kinds of friends at the different stages of our life. So when we are in preschool, pre-grade, different friends. Then when we are teenagers, we've got a different set of friends. When we go to uni, completely different. You move away from them. And then when I started working, I thought I had, different friends. And then when my workplace changed as well, friends changed, okay? So yes, I do think we meet different people. And how are they different? I think they're different in terms of personality, experience, exposure. Because when we are young, we've got limited experience, limited exposure. So we think, oh, right. But as you grow older, you tend to realize that certain things in life are more important. And, you meet mature people with, coming in from different cultures, different perspectives. So I think there are some of the differences. How easy is it to make friends with people from a different age group? Oh, me, I would say I'm not a very friendly, I'm not an extrovert, so I can't make friends quickly. But as I moved in my career as a teacher, I was able to make friends with the little ones very quickly. And I think my strength is, making friends quickly now. But sometimes, with teenagers, it's really hard to bond, right? So I teach teenagers and maybe, the ones who are about 21, 22, 23. Sometimes it's really hard to bond with them because they think so differently. And with time, I've realized that this specific age group, they are completely different. Each batch that I get, they're completely different. So the bonding methods, or it's sometimes really hard to bond with them. So I would say it is easy, but I'm not very comfortable, and it's not really easy for me. Right, so let's have a look at the next question. Influence of friends. Do you think it's possible to be friends with someone if you never meet them in person? Is this real friendship? Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned. I don't think that could happen, but I know some people who have made friends and sometimes they end up marrying these people as well, right? And it works. I'm not saying it's completely out of the context, but for me, I think it's not possible to be friends with someone I haven't met. But still, I think you could have real friendship even though you have not met them. But for me to find real friendship and, have that touch of a friend, I should meet the person in person, and then that's where I build up a real friendship. What kind of influence can friends have on our lives? Sometimes they could have a lot of influence on our dress sense, what we eat, choosing boyfriends sometimes, attending classes, lectures. Sometimes you get so involved with your friends that they become really controlling of your life. So that could be scary sometimes. But apart from that, the factors that I told, they could influence upon. And the last question for this lesson. How important would you say it is to have friends from different cultures? Until I was in Sri Lanka, I didn't have friends from different cultures. I did a few from the same country but different ethnic groups. But when I moved to the UK, I actually found out that there were so many different cultures coming in, and the cultures were so different, right? And it was important because when I started working, I was able to adjust and respect others' views much easily. And when I started doing consultancy, it was even more better because I was working with different nationalities, different cultures. And it was easy for me to understand these people because I'd worked with them before, right? Communication styles, dress sense, language, non-verbal communication, all these things were really important. So I felt that if you work with the different cultured people, it would give you a good exposure. All right, so I think with that, we have come to the end of 4 lessons, or rather, not 4 lessons, 4 tests, right? So in this book, we were having a look at 4 tests, right? Which general as well as academic students, both categories, could have a look at it and answer. So with that, we have come to the end of this lesson, which was looking at test 1, 2, 3, and 4 in Cambridge Book 8.